ahead and get my screen share started. And while I'm doing that, today is really a day where we're going to be talking about best practices in presentations. And so my side of the house, I'm going to be talking a lot about in terms of design and how to really prepare yourself to stand out from a webinar perspective. And I'm curious to ask y'all, just to get some participation going, if you wouldn't mind chiming in the chat, what do you want to create your next presentation about? If you're joining this session, maybe you're thinking about the story you could share with the world or the content you could be bringing to light. So just chime in the chat. Is there an idea you have about, what would your next presentation be about? I'd love to see those shares. And as you're chiming in, I just want to tell you real briefly about myself. If you weren't on the last session that I was on, my name is Madeline Pratt. I'm an expert in technology, and I lead a creative consultancy called Fearless in Training. And we like to say that at Fearless in Training, we forge founders on the path to entrepreneurial equality. So we're really focused on helping people with business strategies around their branding, their marketing, their technology, and their business development to be able to stand out and really build a business that not only allows them to create opportunity for themselves, but also allows to make the world a better place. I'm looking at the chat real quick and I'm seeing some great answers. So I heard somebody say, I'm going to be talking about how singing impacts mental health. I'm going to do an info session for students to increase enrollment. We're creating presentations for recruiting, content about thriving and changing times. These are all amazing ideas. And I think that what we're seeing, one of the benefits we're seeing coming out of this experience is the fact that there is so many opportunities for us to share our expertise online. And so today I'm going to be walking through some of the foundations of the ways that we can really make sure that when we're presenting, we're creating content that is really, really engaging for our audience. So one thing we're going to start talking about is creating engaging slide decks. I'm a big design nerd myself, and I have an amazing design team that I work with. And really, this is one of those things that we often overlook because we say, oh, I don't really know how to use PowerPoint. And so I'm going to talk through some of the best ways that you can actually kind of take advantage of tools and templates on the internet to really make great slides. And then I'm going to be talking a little light level in terms of just preparation for preparing the presentation itself. Nancy is going to be our expert on the actual speaking component, but I'm going to walk you through some processes in terms of how you can outline and build a great presentation. And then last, we're going to close with talking about, how to put this out there to attract the right people. So like I mentioned before, me and my team have a lot of marketing expertise to bring to the table. And so we're going to talk through some just high-level ideas on how to market your webinar to bring the right people in the room. So with that being said, let's talk a little bit about your slides. So one of the first things that I think is really important to think about is how you actually go about structuring your presentations. And so the first tip I always have is what I just did here with you. I set up with an agenda. And I did that intentionally because I think it's really important to remember that when we're giving a presentation, we're really taking people on a journey. We're telling them a story. And the way I like to structure my stories is have a little bit of a prologue. So what are we teaching? Why are we qualified to teach that topic? And what's our agenda for the day? That's the precursor to the story we're going to tell. And then we move into 3 core topics. And I'm really big on minimizing and boiling it down to 3. There's been a lot of interesting neuroscience done about the fact that people really only have the capacity to remember about 3 big takeaways. And so I oftentimes structure my presentation to really be centered around 3 core points. So my first point is usually a foundational point. It's something that builds a layer of understanding so we're all operating on the same playing field. And then my second topic is always a little bit of peak information. Maybe it's like the best nuggets that I want you to take away. And then my third topic is our ending. That's where we bring it home and we kind of wrap everything up with a sense of like how I could turn this into action. And then we have an epilogue to our story. So that's where we have our takeaways, our questions, and our calls to action. So that's what I mean in terms of giving ourselves some structure. So think about when you're building content, when you're building slides, how would you create them in a way that acknowledges that starting moment, that prologue, then that beginning, that first topic, a middle, an ending, and then an epilogue. And the big thing about that epilogue is making sure that in that moment, again, we're talking about our takeaways, like if there's an item or a resource we're giving away so people can continue their learning, or maybe if there's a place they need to go to get that material or get in contact with you, that's also a takeaway. That's also where we're setting ourselves up to ask questions and get feedback from our audience on the experience. And then there's a call to action. So at the end of any great presentation, you're going to ask your folks to go on another journey with you, whether that's going out and signing up for your newsletter, or signing up for the next presentation, as Kathy always tells us to do, or maybe it's filling out a survey. So always closing the moment with that next action that people can take. So I know a lot of folks that want to give presentations to the world, but they hesitate because they're not design inclined. And so they're a little bit worried about, how do I create a slide deck that's going to look nice? And I'm here to tell you that there are lots and lots of great tools and tricks out there that can make your presentations really beautiful without you having to become a design expert overnight. So one thing that you can always do is just use existing templates inside your platform. So if you're using something like a Google Suite or an Office 365 suite, or you've got a Mac and you've got Keynote, if you go into those softwares, there's always a set of templates in there. Now, my recommendation, and I think this is really, really important to remember, is that if you're using those softwares, don't fiddle with the templates. So the templates have been designed to be structured in an appeasing way, in a way that looks aesthetically enjoyable. And so one thing that people do is they maybe start out with a template and then they change the text to a font that they like, and then they change the graphics and they change all these things rather than staying true to the design styling of the template. And so if you just want to work with the software you have and you want to leverage those templates, take advantage, but do your best not to fiddle and change the way the elements appear, but rather just fill in the content as you have it. So that's a great way to just take advantages of the resources available to you. Now, the next thing you can do if you want to take it a little bit further is use one of the amazing free template tools that are out on the internet. So my two favorites are listed here. Slides Go is a website, you can Google search for it, and they have catalogs of just these beautiful templates, and they're styled and you can download them to either PowerPoint or Google Slides, and they're pre-built. And I really love Slides Go for business presentations. If I'm going to give a consulting session with the client, I love leveraging their templates because they have great things inside of them, like a library of icons that are already designed for the templates. They have pre-built graphs sometimes. They have pre-built like other kind of visuals and vector images that you can utilize. And so you don't have to do a lot of searching for things on the internet. And I've found oftentimes that they catalog their presentations in different styles. So you might even be able to find a presentation that's almost identical to what you need to give. And so you really just have to fill in the content, which is really great and speeds up that process. Another great tool that's very similar in terms of the library they offer is Canva. So this template that I use today is a Canva template. I modified it to match my brand colors and populated my own information. But besides that, this template was really pre-built, and Canva does cost money if you sign up for the premium version of the service, but it is a freemium app that you can use online to build really beautiful presentations. And then the third option is if you plan to do a lot of presenting, if you're somebody who's going to be out, and speaking is a really part of who you are as a business or a brand, there's always the opportunity to invest in an expert. So I have a whole team that specializes in doing design work. We build out presentation decks as part of our brand work for clients so that they have materials and templates that's built around their business rather than having to modify an existing template to match the look and feel of your brand. So again, your three options here: use a template inside of an existing platform, just don't fiddle with it. Use one of these amazing tools to get other templates for free, and then also consider paying an expert to design something that's specific for your brand. Now, this other element that I think is really important, that's oftentimes a mistake we see when people are building presentations, is that they throw too many words on a slide. And what happens when people have to sit there and read a slide is they're paying attention to the slide and they stop paying attention to you. And so if somebody needs to read a lot of materials to contextualize what you're offering or saying, make that a takeaway item. Maybe that's, you know, a guide or preparatory material that you offer your audience prior to attending the session, or something you hand them as a follow-up material that they can review after the fact. I also think it's really important to not do what I like to call giving away the goodies. So giving away the goodies is putting all the information out there so that somebody can kind of walk away and say it was their ideas or their information. And so by designing a slide deck that's a little bit minimal in terms of the text you offer, you're also not going to overwhelm your audience while remaining a little bit of a foothold on your intellectual property so that somebody can't go out and steal your words and call them your own. Now, the next piece that I want to recommend when developing slide decks is choosing really high quality visuals. So this is making sure that your visuals are not stretched, they're not pixelated, and they're also cohesive in nature. So for example, if I was using this template with black and white imagery, I would make sure that that's something I consistently do throughout the presentation so that it feels cohesive from a styling perspective. And it's really important to choose from well-curated libraries because visuals really enhance the story that we're sharing. Now, I have a personal mission that I think is really important to also make sure that the imagery we use is inclusive. So what I mean by this is making sure that your images aren't just of white folks, especially if you're working with a diverse demographic. It's really important to make sure that the visuals you're using are representative of the folks that you're working with and aim to work with. And so there's a site that I really love. It's called Tonal. It's spelled T-O-N-L. This is actually a Seattle-based startup started by a Black woman named Karen Okonkwo, and they curate this beautiful, beautiful library of diverse stock imagery. Canva also does a decent job of curating a nice library. And then there's also a resource online called Unsplash, which is a curated library of free stock imagery. So those are all resources you can go to. And so again, what we're looking for when we choose imagery is that, you know, these are large enough images to be presented full screen so that they're not pixelated, they're properly sized, and they should also be nice to look at. And then we also just want to make sure that they're consistent in terms of their look and feel, they're relevant to the topic you're talking about, and they're also inclusive. All right, now this last piece in terms of design styling is to just make sure that you're making it your own. So one of the things that people often forget, especially if they're leveraging templates inside of a software, is to take some time to put your stamp on it. So what I mean by this is to first and foremost include your logo. You want people to remember that this was a product you built for your brand, and so they can go back and remember who you were and kind of have that visual styling represented for you. You want it to be memorable, and so you also want to capture the feeling of your brand in other ways. So for example, I have done in this slide template, making sure that my brand coloring and my brand font are reflected throughout so that this is a material that matches the way we present ourselves in other ways. And then also, I'm protecting my IP. So you'll look at the bottom corner here, I've got a little copyright material to make sure that this is not only looks like it's a representation of my brand and consistent with our style guides, but it's also protecting my intellectual property and trademark to make sure that other people can't go out and steal this material. And I don't want to go down that track too far, but it's really important to just make sure that beyond just representing your brand aesthetics, that you're putting together a presentation that, if need be, you can hold up and say, no, this was our intellectual property. Okay, so that covers what I'm going to share today in terms of style from a design sensibility. If you have questions, I'm going to have time for them at the end, so feel free to throw those into the chat. But now I'm going to just talk to you a little bit about the ways in which I go about preparing presentations, because I think it's really helpful to, if you're sitting down and you're scratching your head about like, how do I set up a great presentation? Let's talk through some tips. So first and foremost, if you're new to presenting, I always say, start with a topic that you could talk about for 10 hours or more without stopping. You know, it's really, really hard. It's a muscle memory thing to learn how to present, and it's hard to do it from scratch. And so if you can start with a topic where if I was to take away my notes and I couldn't look at anything but my screen, I would be able to continue on that conversation without feeling awkward or stuttering. Another thing to think about is that when you're creating your content, always begin with an outline. So I'm a really, really big outline person. I think this is my background in writing essays, but I always sit down and really create the architecture of what I'm going to present prior to diving in and creating the content. And so I always start, again, with that structure I talked about first. What is my information up front, that epilogue that I need to share? Then what are my 3 main points, my beginning, middle, end? And then what is my thing that I want people to remember, or what is the action I want people to take? And that information forms the outline, and then based off of that outline is when I start building my slide deck to correspond to the outline and also to the topics I want to really people to take away. So when crafting this outline, it's really important to just ask yourself this question of like, what do you really want people to remember? What do you really want them to take away from this session? And then use that to inform the way you structure your presentation. Now, I just want to say here that it's really, really important that when you're structuring your content, you're designing it in a way that's meant to captivate and compel action. So we don't just give webinars to just like sit on the internet all day talking to people. We do it to get people to take a next step. I saw all your shares, so maybe some of you, I was thinking about, for example, if you're doing a presentation to do recruiting, well, you want somebody to take the action of then get recruited. Or if you're doing an informational presentation, you might want to have them take a next action by signing up for a course or signing up for some sort of service from your business. So thinking about, what is that action you want people to take, and then creating the content in a way that is engaging, meaningful, consistent, informative, and ultimately inspiring people to take that next step with you and your brand. Now, I gotta just remind you all, this is something that takes practice. You can get help, you can hire a coach, you can try it out and then get feedback from other people. Nancy, as you'll see, is an absolute pro at speaking and presenting. I'm only good at this because it's something I've done for a really long time. After you've given 100 webinars, you could do it in your sleep. But remember that practice is really important. So I practice anything I'm going to present in advance so that I don't sound like a robot and I'm not sitting here just reading off my notes. They're here to guide me, but I'm also showing up as a human so that I can be engaging with you as I'm presenting. Nancy's going to give us even more tips in terms of how to go about showing up as yourself in an engaging way. But remember that when you're creating a presentation, it's important to practice alongside the content you've prepared to make sure that the flow makes sense for your audience and make sure that people are going to be able to resonate with what you're having to share. So the last thing we're going to touch on real quick is just some thoughts in terms of marketing. So I want you to remember that it's really important not just to create a great presentation, but to make sure that you have the right people in the room who are going to resonate with what you have to share. So first, you've got to have a clear understanding of who that audience is. Why are you making this webinar in the first place? Who do you want to attract? And then you'll have some guidelines in terms of how you can market to them. So the last thing I want to just offer here is just some ideas on how you could get started in putting the word out into the world about your webinar experience to attract folks in. So one of the things I love to do is creating some sort of teaser video, just a little preview of who you are and what you're sharing and who it could benefit so that people get a sense of what it could be like to sit down with you for an hour and learn from you. Another thing you could do is run some sort of paid advertisement. You could leverage platforms like Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn to put that teaser out into the world in a bigger way to attract in folks that you want to attend. And especially if you have a good targeted demographic, ads and even without too much of a spend, just a couple $100 can be a great way to get the right folks in the room. Other actions could be creating an email campaign, running a promotion on your website, so like a banner ad across the top, just saying, checking out our next webinar, click here to register. Writing a blog post that contextualizes what you're gonna share and then has a call to action at the bottom of join the webinar. And then of course, sharing on social media. So if you're writing a blog post or you're creating a teaser video and you have a following on social media, sharing it out and then also asking other people you're connected to spread the word is a great way to start attracting people to the content you're creating. Now, of course, you don't have to just take one of these actions in a vacuum. You can take 1, 2, 3 in combination or all 6. These are just some ideas of how you could get started. So I just want to close with this quote, which is a reminder that great marketing is about telling consistent stories, testing new ideas, and making meaningful connections with the audience you aim to serve. So just remember that when you're taking on something new, like creating your first webinar, creating new presentations out for the world, there's always learning to be had. And as long as you're showing up consistently and improving every time, you're going to start making meaningful connections with people through sharing your story via webinars. So with all that said, I want to just open the floor for any quick questions that people might have. And my call to action for all of you is that my team and I are hosting a webinar next week called Social Media for Social Impact. This is a session where my creative director is going to be talking about how to leverage social media to share your values and talk about the things that are going on in the world right now in a way that's authentic and consistent with your brand. So it's a free webinar if anybody wants to check out and learn more about some social media skill sets. And if you want to connect on a call with me, I'll also share my contact information as well. But I just want to hop into the chat real quick and see if we've had any questions come through. I'm going to stop my screen share. And let's see, I haven't seen any questions, but feel free to ask them. And I'm going to just actually pull my screen share up one more time just to share my contact details. And I'll also put them in the chat. So if you want to connect with me in any way, shape, or form, here's my calendar link, my email address, website, social media, all the goodies. So you can screenshot that and I can put them in the chat as well.
Thank you, Madeline. And if people have a question pop up, oh, here's one.
Yeah.
Just popped in. What is the ideal length of a presentation?
Ooh, that's a great question. It really depends on the nature of the content you're presenting. So I think that at a minimum, if you really want people to get engaged and learn, 30 minutes is a bare minimum. This might be like a general informational session if I was doing something that was super high level, because you really have to have that time at the end to have, a little bit of Q&A and a little bit of intro at the front. And so, that's really, you're creating 15 to 20 minutes of content and then padding your space at the end. Now, if I'm doing teaching and training, I'm looking at 60 to 75 minutes. And then sometimes if I'm doing something that's a really, really deep dive training, I'll extend it to 90 minutes. But in terms of attention spans, especially with how much we're hanging out on Zoom these days, it's not great to go much longer than that, especially, you could do like, if you're doing a training or a teaching session, I would just break it up if you're doing anything longer than that, just so people have a little bit of a brain break in between.
Oh, now somebody's asking about a video pre-presentation, like a teaser.
Like a teaser. So how to go about constructing that? My recommendation is keep it to less than 60 seconds, because on social media, different platforms have limitations in terms of how much content can be previewed or used in an ad format. 60 seconds is kind of the standard. You also think about like a trailer, like a movie trailer, like we tune out after a certain point, and think about it as an opportunity to just highlight the top notes of what you'll share. Like if somebody was like, pitch me in 60 seconds what you're going to be presenting, share that, and then also share it with a level of excitement and engagement so people feel like they've got to come to the session to learn more.
Super. Best practice for number of slides.
Ooh. So this varies depending on folks, because I'm somebody who really emphasizes that limiting of text. I tend to do a slide per minute for my presentations. Sometimes I'll do like a slide per 2 minutes, like in my longer style presentations. But I think in order to retain people's attention, it's actually important to move through our slides a little bit quickly. It also allows the slides to be a bulky takeaway material. I'm going to give you guys these slides today as a takeaway material. And so that feels like substantial, because it's I think in total 15 or 16 slides. That can feel overwhelming for some folks. I also know people who like to present, primarily themselves and have just like 1, 2, or 3 slides. So it's a little bit up to your style and purview, but I just say, as long as you're not putting too much text on them, you're okay to kind of work in a way that's style best for you.
Super. Okay, I think that's it for now. And of course, people can keep posting questions, and if we have time at the end, when it's, any question at all, then we'll address them then. So thanks, Madeline. Great info. And I wish I didn't have a conflict next Wednesday for your
It'll be
webinar.
recorded, so if you
Okay.
can't make it and you want to sign up, Algelyn Sperber, who's done a couple of these KEDA presentations, is my creative director, so she'll be on there teaching.
Awesome. Thank you.